Cat food sold in multiple states is being recalled for low levels of thiamine.
Every evening, in homes across the country, the routine feels comforting. A can opens, a bowl fills, a cat eats, and the owner feels confident. They chose wisely. But what if some of the most trusted brands are quietly cutting corners where it matters most? The truth is, not all cat food is created equal. Some brands rely heavily on vague labeling, low-quality fish sources, and byproducts that may carry higher risks of contaminants like mercury, especially when fish like tuna or mackerel are used without strict sourcing standards. Take 9 Lives, for example. It's widely available and affordable, but critics often point to its use of meat byproducts and lack of transparency about ingredient sourcing. Then there's Friskies, a household name, yet frequently questioned for artificial additives and inconsistent protein quality. Meow Mix is another brand many recognize instantly, but behind the catchy marketing, some formulas rely more on fillers like corn and soy than real high-quality protein. Similarly, Kitten Caboodle has raised concerns due to artificial colors and limited nutritional value for long-term feline health. Finally, Special Kitty, a budget-friendly option, often uses lower-grade ingredients and offers little clarity about where its fish or meat actually comes from. This doesn't mean every product from these brands is dangerous, but it does mean cat owners should look deeper. Words like natural aren't tightly regulated, and labels don't always reveal the full picture. Your cat depends entirely on what you put in that bowl. And while the ritual may feel routine, the choices behind it matter more than most people realize. Dr. Sarah Dunham Cheatham, an assistant research professor at the University of Nevada, Reno, decided to measure exactly how much mercury was reaching pets through commercial food. Her team purchased and tested 101 pet food products, 47 cat foods, and 54 dog foods across a wide range of brands and price points. They measured total mercury concentrations in every sample using established laboratory protocols. What they found was striking. Mercury concentrations across all samples ranged from 1 to 604 nanograms per gram. That upper figure did not come from a cheap generic product. It came from a fish-based food. 14 of the 101 samples that exceeded 100 nanograms per gram, the threshold the research team identified as a level of concern modeled from river otters, which are mammals with a fish-based diet and comparable food intake to a domestic cat. Every single one of those 14 samples that exceeded the threshold had one thing in common. Fish was listed as a primary ingredient on the label. The study was published in the Science of the Total Environment, a peer-reviewed journal. Dr. Dunham Cheatham stated plainly, based on the results, she would encourage pet owners to avoid or minimize feeding fish-based foods to their pets to reduce risks associated with chronic mercury exposure. The word chronic is doing a great deal of work in that sentence, and it deserves attention. A human being eats a varied diet. Breakfast is different from dinner. This week's meals differ from last week's. Exposure to any single contaminant is diluted across dozens of food sources, dozens of ingredients, dozens of variables. A cat does not eat that way. A cat in a domestic household typically eats the same food from the same brand, sourced from the same protein every single day of its life, day after day, month after month, for 10, 12, 15 years. The owner who picks up the same product week after week, trusting consistency, trusting familiarity, is also delivering consistent exposure with every bowl they fill. If that food carries mercury, the cat receives an unbroken dose at every single meal. There is no rotation, no dilution, no natural break in the cycle. Methylmercury does not leave the body quickly. It accumulates in tissue, in the brain, in the kidneys, in the liver. The cup fills slowly, without any outward sign that anything is wrong. By the time clinical signs appear, it has been filling for a very long time.
The clinical signs of mercury toxicity in cats are documented and specific. They include loss of coordination and balance, difficulty walking, tremors, cognitive decline, and, in advanced cases, seizures. Veterinarians have noted that these symptoms closely resemble those of thiamine deficiency, brain tumors, and other neurological conditions, which means mercury toxicity in cats is frequently misdiagnosed. A cat deteriorating slowly over months or years may never receive a correct diagnosis because the food it eats every day is rarely the first thing a veterinarian considers. Dr. May Sexauer-Gustin, a professor at the University of Nevada, Reno, and a co-author on the mercury pet food study, has noted that the lack of any regulatory standard for mercury in pet food makes it impossible to systematically address the problem. Without a limit, there is no violation. Without a violation, there is no enforcement. Without enforcement, nothing changes. Here is where the story moves from biology into bureaucracy, and where the quiet reality of the system becomes visible. The Food and Drug Administration regulates pet food under the same broad federal law that governs human food. In principle, pet food must be safe and unadulterated. In practice, the FDA has not established specific action levels, guidance values, or enforceable tolerances for mercury, lead, arsenic, or cadmium in cat or dog food. The agency has acknowledged this directly in its own published materials. Manufacturers are expected to self-regulate. There is no mandatory finished product testing requirement. A company can formulate, produce, and ship a product without ever measuring the heavy metal content of the final item that goes on the shelf. When the FDA needs to evaluate whether a heavy metal level in pet food is acceptable, it refers to a document called the Mineral Tolerance of Animals, published by the National Research Council. That document was last updated in 2005. The science it contains reflects research conducted before that date, research that predates much of what is now understood about chronic low-level heavy metal exposure and its neurological effects in companion animals. The FDA has stated that it will not establish new limits until the science in that document is updated. The update has not happened. To put the gap in concrete terms, the FDA's action level for lead in bottled water is 5 parts per billion. Its action level for lead in children's dry cereal, established as recently as 2025, is 20 parts per billion. Its maximum tolerable level for lead in pet food is 10,000 parts per billion. That is not a misprint. The number that would trigger regulatory concern in a bag of cat food is 2,000 times higher than the number that would trigger concern in a glass of water. A second peer-reviewed study, published in Scientific Reports, one of the world's most widely cited scientific journals, analyzed 93 imported cat and dog food products purchased from the market in China, all manufactured between 2021 and 2022. Researchers from Huazhong Agricultural University in Wuhan tested each sample for lead, cadmium, chromium, mercury, and arsenic. Chromium and arsenic were detected in every single sample tested, all 93. Mercury was detected in 91 of the 93 samples. The study concluded that variations in raw material sourcing were a primary driver of contamination, and that dry food processing techniques, including puffing, granulating, and baking, may concentrate heavy metals during production. The researchers also raised a finding that rarely makes its way into marketing materials. Packaging materials themselves, particularly certain food contact plastics, can leach heavy metals, including lead, cadmium, mercury, and chromium, into pet food over time. There is one more dimension to this story that concerns cats specifically, more than any other companion animal. Cats are obligate carnivores. Their bodies are designed to process animal protein, and they consume it exclusively. Dogs are omnivores. They eat plant matter alongside protein, which dilutes their overall toxic load from animal-sourced contaminants. Cats do not have that buffer. Research published in the Biological Trace Element Research Journal found that the allowable hazard index for mercury was exceeded by 4 to 5 times in some of the cat foods tested when measured against safe chronic consumption thresholds. That number did not come from exotic or specialty products. It came from commercial canned and pouched cat foods widely sold in retail stores, products that carry perfectly legal labels and make no misleading claims. Kittens, whose organs are still developing, face a compounded risk compared to adult cats, in the same way that infants face greater risk from heavy metals than adults do. Small body weight, rapid organ development, a nervous system still forming its architecture. The same gram of contaminated food delivers a proportionally larger dose to a kitten than to a fully grown cat. And many owners who bring a kitten home begin feeding fish-based food immediately because kittens respond to the smell and taste of fish with enthusiasm. The exposure, in other words, often begins early. The labeling system offers no guidance on any of this. A cat food label in the United States is required to list ingredients, guaranteed analysis values for protein, fat, fiber, and moisture, and the name and address of the manufacturer. It is not required to disclose heavy metal testing results. It is not required to state whether finished products, as opposed to raw ingredients, have been tested at all. It is not required to specify which waters the fish were sourced from, or whether mercury levels were measured in the specific catch used in that production batch. Dr. Dunham-Cheatham's study uncovered a troubling issue that goes beyond simple contamination levels. A significant number of pet food products contained ingredients that were not accurately reflected on their labels. In many cases, the fish species listed did not match the fish actually present in the product. This discrepancy is important not only for pets with specific allergies, but also because different fish species carry dramatically different levels of mercury. Tuna, for example, which appears frequently in cat food, is known to be one of the highest mercury fish in the food supply. If a product claims to contain a low mercury fish, but is actually made with tuna-based meal, the resulting mercury exposure for the cat could be far higher than the owner expects. Over time, this hidden risk may quietly impact the animal's health. Meanwhile, the routine remains unchanged. The bowl is still on the floor, the cat has finished eating, and the owner simply rinses it and sets it aside for tomorrow, unaware of the potential danger. Nothing about this scene looks different from any other evening. The smell sounds the same, the label reads the same, the cat behaved the same. The system that produced what was in that bowl is still operating exactly as it was designed, sourcing fish from open ocean waters, processing it under manufacturing conditions that are not required to test for mercury, packaging it in containers that carry no heavy metal disclosure, and selling it under regulatory limits that were last reviewed when many of today's cat owners were still in high school. Dr. Gustin put it plainly in her research. There is an urgent need for an established and enforced limit for contaminants in pet foods, based on what is safe for chronic consumption. That recommendation sits in a published, peer-reviewed scientific paper. The limit has not been established, the enforcement does not exist. The cat will eat again tomorrow morning. Same bowl, same food, same system. Nobody is required to tell you what is in it. Nobody ever was.